Here he is, back from a few weeks away. We missed him on Labor Day. It's our Monday NHL Insider from the Bob McCown podcast. Mr. John Shannon, how you doing, fella?
Hey, I was here. I was ready to go. I would have been here, but you guys need your days off. You need your days off all the time. Come on.
I know. You're the ultimate put-me-in coach guy. I will give you total credit for that, John. You would rearrange...
or as my wife says, there isn't a microphone you don't love. So.
Well, I was going to say you'd rearrange weddings and funerals to make the hit, and we thank you for it.
Maybe even my own, right?
Which means this is the first time we're getting a chance to talk to you since JT Miller resigned. So we'll ask you the question we were asking them last week: is a good deal for the Vancouver Canucks?
I think it is. I mean, let's face it. JT Miller makes the Vancouver Canucks a better hockey club. I know that if you sat at a pub on Robson Street with Bruce Boudreau, you'd be able to tell him, or maybe at the Wall Center, guys, let's be honest. He would tell you, I'm glad I got Miller back, because they need JT Miller's leadership. They need JT Miller's scoring. It makes them a bigger and deeper team. So, and it probably helps them sell some tickets. So, yes, I think it is a better move. And if the team does falter as the season goes on, I think and this is not, I don't think, much of a contemplation at this point. But I do think that Miller, under contract for the amount of time that he is, probably makes him more marketable for a team that thinks they're going for it at the deadline. So I think it's a win-win.
You think that other teams are looking at that contract thinking, hey, I would have paid the guy that? Do you think, that's a movable contract?
Yeah, I do. I really do. And particularly if you can find a way in the short term, and I read the short term, Blake, as 2 years, to make the dollars work, because we know that the cap's going to go up at least $10 million in 2024. So, this is one of those ones that if Miller plays to his potential, in year 3, it's going to look like a fantastic contract, and he's going to look like a true contributor to the Canucks' success.
Something changed here, John. We, heard earlier in the summer that they were quite a far ways apart. Miller himself said they hadn't talked much at all until a couple of weekends ago. Do you have any insight on what changed, what moved the needle on either side here that got them together on a deal?
I don't. But what I can tell you, and I in listening to people in Canucks management, there was never panic. There was a pragmatic system and a pragmatic philosophy to say, okay, if it gets done, it gets done, and we're gonna do it properly. So when it did happen, and I, as you guys know, I have never been an advocate of moving him anyway. But I really thought that this went according to plan for Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin. This is what they expected it to happen. And it worked out, and I think it worked out for both sides.
It's not the only deal the Canucks have done recently. It's not a contract. It's only a PTO. What did you think of their invitation to Danny DeKeyser, and what does he have left?
I don't know. I asked a few my friends in Detroit about what DeKeyser has left, and I some of them were saying, well, it's he's pretty battered and bruised. He's had a few injury issues. At the same time, that I think you have to look at what the Canucks need to do to become more, not necessarily cap compliant, but more nimble with the cap, and it's on the blue line. And you guys have talked about that endlessly, about what they have to do with some of their defensemen. And so having somebody that they think can contribute as a 6 or a 7, like DeKeyser, who is a veteran, it probably helps them when they make a decision if they can actually move one of those defenseman contracts.
Well, speaking of cap compliance, my friend, and you've been mentioning this all summer, the number of clubs that are over the cap here in the summer and what they're going to have to do to get compliance by opening night. I was struck on Friday by a simple tweet about Nick Hague, who's a nice young defenseman in Vegas, and they're not able to get to a deal with him. He's a restricted free agent. They also have 49 players under contract already, Vegas, so they're not only $10 million above the spending limit, they're right at the contract limit as well. You were telling us off air you see some happenings here in terms of player movement.
I think that once, and it's funny. This has been such a strange summer. Once we got through that first wave of free agency, so by the middle of July, I think people were utterly burned out for the last 2 years. Burned out, and almost every manager to a team needed time away, needed to recharge the batteries, and that's why it went so quiet. And rather than doing a couple of key deals, and now they're back, and now they've got their work cut out for them before camps start on September 20th, and before the season starts that 12th or 13th of October. So there are going to be deals made. There are teams well over the cap. At one point, guys, there were 12 teams over that number. I don't think the number's that high right now, but there's gonna have to be some shuffling done right now between now and, well, basically, I guess for the next 30 days, in order to be ready for the regular season. Otherwise, we're going to see teams playing with 17 skaters, and I don't think that's really an option at this point for any team.
I think Canuck fans are wishing, John, that they had a little bit more cap space now to help out one of these teams, right? I'm sure all those teams that are feeling pretty good about themselves that have a few million in cap space, they're looking pretty good right now. I would think right before opening night, there's going to be some opportunities, no?
Oh, I agree, Blake. I mean, it could happen anytime now, and I would expect that all the managers are on the phones to each other discussing what's going to happen and how it can improve their own position. And I wouldn't rule out the Canucks either, simply because of three-way deals and teams needing third parties in order to try to take contracts and take some money. I think that I think everybody's in play at this point, and I think that there are guys that are trying to become compliant, and then there's going to be a few vultures out there just circling, waiting for the right opportunity to strike and improve their teams.
Yeah, you wonder about the Red Wings and Senators, who have already taken steps this summer to be better this year and are sitting there awash in cap space as well, and what they might be able to do here before the season. And you're spot on, Mr. Shannon. It is exactly 12 teams that are over the cap. We'd love to see the Pride of Oliver, BC, later this week in Penticton for the Young Stars tournament.
I
understand that's not going to be feasible for you this year.
Well, I tell you what, it is one of the great events, and it's just a relief to me from the point of view of the four Western teams that they have finally got behind all of the politics of the situation to go back to Penticton, because it is a place where I have been to enough of these things and had so much fun and enjoyed it, and watched, Bo Horvat make his first impression, saw Johnny Gaudreau make his first impression, saw Connor McDavid make his first impression. It is something. Elias Pettersson to make his first impression. It is so much fun, and it's a great atmosphere. That's a great building in Penticton. It's a ton of fun, and needless to say, it's home, and it's always good to go home, and the golf courses are still open there. So
yes,
you don't have to watch hockey all day.
Right, and it's sort of, as someone who's spent a lot of time, it sort of extends the summer season a little bit for them. Those communities in the South Okanagan are so reliant on tourism. You're so right about the building. We're having your dear friend Jim Hewson on the show from Penticton, who's now ahead of the BC Hockey Hall of Fame, which is lodged there at the South Okanagan Event Center.
Don't go throw eggs at my display, will you, please? So
no, we won't. In fact, we were planning to put a fake mustache on your visit. And it's, of course, modeled after the Traverse City tournament that the Red Wings put on way back when. So one of these years, John, you're going to have to come on home and join us in Penticton for Young Stars.
Hey, listen, had we had a little bit more warning, we probably would have been able to make it happen.
Because speaking of home, 50 years ago this month, John Shannon made his first decision as a television producer.
Okay.
Because we are just a few days past here, the loss to the Soviet Union at Pacific Coliseum, the booing, and, of course, Phil Esposito. Take us back, John.
Well, Gosh, it's like it was yesterday for me, because people of my generation, and I'm older than both of you, the two monumental moments in our lives were, where were you when Kennedy was shot, and where were you when Henderson scored? And that's how important, iconic the Summit Series was to so many of us. So later this month, 50th anniversary of later this month, we had a nice quiet family dinner. My father was the principal of the high school that I went to, and I was in grade 10 at the time, and I got into a giant argument with my dad about we had to be able to watch the game. And, because in the Pacific time zone, the games were during school hours. It wasn't like the East, where the games were at 3 or 4 o'clock. And so after being adamant that it shouldn't happen, I think that I got so mad at him, he finally relented. And so we were allowed to bring televisions into classrooms at Southern Okanagan Secondary School and watch Game 8. Watch the team be down 5-3 after 2 periods and then score 3 in the third to win the series, and life went on as it should. It was a fantastic period of time to love the game of hockey. It was political, it was emotional, it was national, it was everything you wanted. It was, and it's funny, I was talking to Bob Cole about this last week. It was 10 times better than Lake Placid. 10 times better than we because everybody remembers the iconic Eruzione goal and the Americans beating the Russians, or the Soviets rather. But Summit Series was it, and that it was that much bigger and that much better.
And who knows?
It was all USA Hockey had. That's why 1980 got such shine.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was just going to say, and who would have guessed a dinner table argument between father and son launched the most successful hockey producing career in this country on television?
I'm not so sure about that, but suffice to say that my dad was very popular with the 750 students in the school for one day, and I'm sure. I didn't dare tell anybody at that point that I was the one who made him do it. But we used to have good arguments at our dinner table. That was fun.
As we debate, when and for what the NHL should pause in the middle of its season, and granted, this was obviously not in the middle of the season being a fall thing, but still, distraction for the top players in the entire league here. Remind our listeners that not only were they playing the Summit Series, but they played other games too. And this was a huge swath of time. Like, this was weeks and weeks of commitment for this one quote-unquote series.
That's right. Well, there was a training camp in Toronto. It wasn't very good because nobody was in shape. In 1972, most teams, most players went to camp to get in shape. And this was a month ahead of that. So in addition to playing the 4 games in Canada between I guess it was the 2nd and the 8th, including the one in Vancouver where Phil made the great speech, there was time between the 4 games in Canada and the 4 games in Moscow. And the team went to Sweden and played 2 bloodbath games against the Swedish national team. That in many ways, if you talk to the players on that club, it galvanized the team as a team. Between everybody in Canada being all over their back after Vancouver, and the games in Sweden, it really did make them a team. And to a man, they speak of how important that was. The other one they forget, Blake, is after the 4th game in Moscow and the Henderson goal with 34 seconds to go and Foster Hewitt's great call, the team went to Prague.
They weren't done.
I'm not sure how sober they were, but they played an exhibition game against the Czech national team to honor Stan Mikita, who was obviously Czech-born but had grown up in Southern Ontario and was a member of that team in 1972. And Mikita got a standing ovation in Prague for a game that meant absolutely nothing at that point, but it was supposed to have raised money for the NHL Players Pension Fund, which we all know became a a huge distraction and a controversy.
Did they play exhibition games before the 8, before the 4 in Canada? You know,
No,
so you just counted out
didn't.
11 games. No,
they didn't. But what they did do, if you recall, they took 35 players to camp.
Yeah,
including a couple of Canucks.
Squad.
So they played a lot of inter-squad. They took 35 to camp, and including Josh Gavermont, who was a first-round pick of the Canucks, and Dale Talon, who was the first pick overall for the Canucks. They were on that team for a certain period of time.
I mean, it's just astonishing to go from the highs of the Henderson goal to go play an exhibition in Prague.
Yeah, well,
Can we just go home?
Amazing.
Well,
amazing.
And the famous story was the at Nathan Phillips Square here in Toronto City Hall, was there was rumors of at least 250,000 people there, because they did have a pep rally after the fact, and not many players came off the plane and onto the bus to go downtown. Not many of them came back sober. they had drunk themselves silly all the way from Prague to Toronto.
Oh man, amazing. Well, we will mark the 50th anniversary of the Henderson goal later this month, but marvelous discussion about it. John, thank you for this. Until next Monday.
And enjoy Penticton, and don't forget to go by and see my grandfather's picture on the SS Sekeres. He was the chief engineer, John McCrae. So you better go down there to see that. Not far from the arena.
Right there. I was going to say right there on the Lake Okanagan side.
And then you could go visit City Hall, where my uncle was the mayor. You know, there are lots of things going on.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize he was Penticton royalty on top of being the pride of
drive down Shannon Boulevard, presumably, as well. So.
Well, that's a dead-end dirt road in Oliver, I think.